Get her out of my trauma bay. Dr. Briggs said it without looking up. Casual. The way a man swipes a fly off his sleeve. Sarah Calloway stood in the doorway, syringe still in hand, knuckles white around the casing. The man on the table was bleeding out. Monitors were screaming, and the chief trauma surgeon of Sharp Memorial Hospital just told the only nurse calm enough to help to leave. No reason, no discussion. 4 words dropped in front of every doctor, every tech, every person in that room like a door being slammed in someone's face. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And Sarah did not leave. If you have ever been told you do not belong somewhere you know you are needed, you are about to understand exactly what that feels like. Subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and drop your city down in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let us go back to where it all began. The morning started the way most mornings did at Sharp Memorial Hospital, with someone else's emergency becoming everyone else's problem. Sarah Calloway arrived at 6:45, 14 minutes before her shift was supposed to begin. She did not do it to impress anyone. She did it because she needed those 14 minutes. 14 minutes to walk the halls before they filled with noise, to check the supply cabinets, before anyone else disturbed them, to breathe before breathing became something she had to consciously manage. It was a small ritual, private, the kind of thing no one notices about a person until much later when they are trying to piece together who someone really was. She was 30 years old, though most people guessed younger. Something about the way she carried herself quietly, without taking up too much space, made her seem like a woman who was still finding her footing. Her colleagues had decided this about her early on, the way people decide things quickly in a busy hospital, because there is no time for nuance and first impressions have a way of sticking. She was soft-spoken. She was unobtrusive. She was in the precise vocabulary of the nurse's station, easy to overlook. This was not an accident. She wore her dark hair pulled back, her scrubs standard hospital blue, her sneakers worn at the left heel from a habit of shifting her weight when she stood still for too long. She carried her tablet with 2 hands. She said please and thank you in a world that had largely stopped bothering with either. There was nothing about her that announced itself. She had worked very hard to make that true. The trauma unit was already moving by the time she clocked in. A multi-car accident on the I-15 had come through overnight. 2 gunshot wounds from a neighborhood off University Avenue. A construction worker with rebar through his shoulder who had inexplicably driven himself to the emergency room. Patricia Wells, the charge nurse, was at the desk with her clipboard, navigating all of it with the focused, slightly caffeinated efficiency of a woman who had seen everything twice and was unimpressed by most of it. Calloway. Patricia barely glanced up. Bay 3 needs a line reset. Bay 7, the family is asking questions again, and if anyone asks, the supply order did not come in. Understood, Sarah said. Patricia looked up, really looked the way she occasionally did when she remembered that the person she was talking to was a human being and not simply a scheduling variable. You eat this morning. I am fine. That is not what I asked. Sarah almost smiled. I had coffee. Patricia made a sound that was clearly not approval. Bay 3, go. Sarah went. She moved through the unit efficiently without wasted motion. She nodded to the overnight nurses finishing their last hour. She sidestepped a gurney rolling out of radiology. She pushed through the doors of Bay 3 and had assessed the patient before she had fully crossed the threshold. Elderly man, mid-70s, eye-voice line, had slipped awake and alert and carrying the specific embarrassment of a person who believed they were not supposed to need help. I did not pull it on purpose, he said. I know, she said. It just came loose. They do that. She was already resetting the line, her hands steady, her movements clean and practiced. Pain level right now, 5, maybe 6. I will let Dr. Nguyen know. She finished, checked his wristband, made a note on her tablet. Anything else you need right now? He hesitated. My daughter keeps calling. They will not let me answer. Sarah looked at him, not the chart look, which is a professional tool, but the actual look, which is a human one. I will see what I can do. Something in his shoulders dropped. The small, particular tension of a person who has felt invisible briefly and quietly eased. She was back in the hallway 40 seconds later. That was the shape of the morning. Bay 3, Bay 7, a medication check in Bay 1, a 3-minute conversation with a frightened young woman in the waiting area whose husband had been brought in with chest pains. 3 minutes was not much, but Sarah had learned in a context very different from this one that 3 minutes given fully is worth more than an hour given partially. She sat with the woman. She made eye contact. She said, "I hear you," and she meant it in the specific way that changes the temperature of a room. She was at the medication station just past 9 o'clock when the radio at the nurse's desk crackled. Nobody paid attention. Radios crackled constantly. But the voice on the other end had a quality that was different from the standard traffic flat and controlled in the specific manner of someone who was actively fighting to stay that way, and Sarah's hands stopped moving before her brain caught up to why. Sharp Memorial, this is Echo 7. We are 2 minutes out with a priority 1. GSW multiple upper torso. BP dropping. We are requesting trauma team and security clearance to the South Bay. I say again, security clearance. Do you copy? The desk went quiet. Patricia picked up the receiver. Echo 7, we copy. Trauma team assembling now. What is the nature of the security clearance request? A beat, one single beat of silence. The kind that carries information in it. Patient is active duty special operations. We have a military working dog on scene that is currently non-compliant. We need personnel cleared before approach. This is not optional. Patricia looked at the desk coordinator. The desk coordinator looked at Patricia. The intercom clicked. On it done. Trauma team to South Bay. Trauma team to South Bay. Sarah set the medication tray down on the counter. She did not run. Running drew attention, and attention drew questions, and questions took time. She walked with purpose, which looks almost identical from a distance, but gets a person where they need to be considerably faster. She reached the South Bay doors just as Dr. Marcus Briggs came through them from the opposite direction, and for a moment they were face to face in the narrow corridor. Briggs was 53 and built like a man who had been athletic 20 years ago and had since converted that frame into simple size. He had salt and pepper hair and a reputation that arrived in rooms several seconds before he did. He was by every measurable clinical standard an exceptional surgeon. He was also the kind of man who had been told he was exceptional so many times and for so long that he had come to confuse the compliment with a fact about the universe rather than a fact about himself. He looked at Sarah the way he always looked at her, like a piece of furniture that had been slightly repositioned from where he preferred it. Calloway. He did not slow down. You are not trauma assigned today. Patricia sent me to assist. Patricia can find you something else. He pushed through the South Bay doors. I need experienced personnel in there. Sarah followed him anyway. The doors opened and the sound hit her first. It was a sound she had not heard in 4 years. The overlapping rhythm of military personnel managing a crisis short-clipped. Commands boots on hard floors equipment, moving fast, voices doing the specific emotional work of staying level under pressure. It bypassed everything rational in her and landed somewhere deeper and older somewhere that did not need to think about what it was hearing because it already knew. She breathed through it, evenly, once. The gurney came through the loading dock entrance with 4 people around it. 3 in tactical gear, faces, hard hands in motion. The 4th was a field medic still applying pressure to a wound high on the patient's right chest, his voice low and steady as he relayed vitals to anyone within reach. And then there was the dog. He came in alongside the gurney attached by a lead to one of the operators, but the lead was almost beside the point. The Belgian Malinois was dark-coated and compact and vibrating with something that existed in the space between energy and fury. He moved in lockstep with the gurney as if he and the man on it shared a single nervous system. His name, Sarah would learn shortly, was Ghost. Right now what she knew was what she could see. Ears fully forward, eyes locked on the wounded man. And when one of the trauma nurses moved too quickly toward the gurney, Ghost pivoted his entire body without a bark, without a growl. Just the pivot and the weight behind it and the absolute clarity of what it communicated. The nurse stepped back. Everybody hold. The SEAL operator holding the lead raised his free hand. He was younger than Sarah expected, late 20s, with the bearing of a man who had learned authority the hard way rather than the easy way. His name tape read Walsh. Nobody approaches until I say so. Excuse me. Briggs's voice had acquired its particular edge, the one that materialized whenever the natural order of things, meaning his order of things, was being disrupted. This is my trauma bay. That is my patient. and I will determine what happens in this room." Walsh looked at him without hostility and without particular deference. "Sir, with respect, Ghost has already bitten 2 people today. One of them was me." He held up his left hand, a field bandage wrapped around it, already dark at the center. "Commander Reyes is his handler. When Reyes is down, Ghost does not permit approach. That is not aggression. That is his purpose. Then sedate the animal. We attempted that twice in the field. He fought the first injection, and we believe he expelled the second." Walsh's voice was entirely flat, entirely serious. "Ghost is not a standard working dog." Briggs turned to the room. "Someone contact animal control." "Animal control is a minimum 40 minutes out," the field medic said, and his voice was raw with something that was not quite frustration and not quite desperation, but lived right at the edge of both. He had not stopped applying pressure. He had not stopped working. "Commander Reyes does not have 40 minutes. His pressure is at 70/40 and falling. The bleed is deep and internal. He needs a surgeon. He needed one before we arrived." The room shifted. It was subtle, the way the temperature of a room shifts not from any one thing, but from the collective recognition that the stakes have clarified themselves. Everyone got very still, the way people get still when a situation stops being theoretical. Reyes was on the gurney. He was barely conscious. His lips had gone the color of candle wax, and his chest was moving in the shallow arrhythmic pattern of a body negotiating with itself about what it could still afford to sustain. His right hand had found Ghost's coat somewhere between the loading dock and the trauma bay, and was still holding it loosely, the grip of a man drifting, but refusing on some wordless, fundamental level to let go. Ghost was tracking everything, every face, every shift of weight, every hand that moved toward an instrument. His dark eyes swept the room continuously and returned every few seconds to Reyes with the singular focus of an animal who has assigned itself a task and does not recognize the concept of abandoning it. Sarah had positioned herself near the back wall. She was watching. She watched a trauma nurse attempt an approach from the left side and Ghost redirect his entire body to meet it. No sound, no warning, just movement and certainty. She watched one of the other operators try calling the dog's name in a low, authoritative voice, and Ghost register it the way a soldier registers background noise, acknowledged and set aside. She watched Briggs' jaw tighten with each passing second as the situation remained exactly as unmanageable as it had been at the start. And she watched the monitor numbers. She watched Reyes's oxygen saturation. She watched his pressure. She watched his breathing, the depth of it, the interval between breaths, the specific way his chest rose and how far it fell. She did the math. The same math she had been trained to do until it ran automatically without invitation, without ceremony. The kind of calculation that does not ask whether you are ready, it simply tells you what the numbers mean. 3 minutes, perhaps 4. After that, the available decisions would be different ones. She moved forward, not quickly, not with any motion that would spike the dog's instinct toward action. She moved the way she had been trained to move in precisely these circumstances, clearly, deliberately, with the complete calm of someone who has made the decision and is now simply executing it. She walked through the cluster of personnel, and nobody stopped her because her pace communicated nothing alarming, and by the time anyone registered that she was heading directly toward the gurney, she was already closing the distance. "Calloway." Briggs, sharp. "What do you think you are doing?" She did not answer. "Calloway, I gave you a—" "Watch him," she said. She was not speaking to Briggs. She was 4 feet from the gurney. Ghost had turned to face her. His full body oriented toward her weight, shifted forward, every line of him communicating that a decision had been reached and was pending execution. Sarah stopped. Her hands came to her sides, open palms, angled slightly forward. She did not look away from Ghost. She did not perform harmlessness. She did not make herself small. That would have been a performance, and the dog would have seen through it in the first second, because animals trained in combat do not respond to performance. They respond to truth. So she gave him truth. She looked at him level and steady, the look of someone who had been in the kind of situations that hollow most people out and had come out the other side intact, not unaffected, not unchanged, but intact. "Ghost," she said, even, neither loud nor soft, easy. The dog's ears moved, not back, which is a warning, but a small, brief adjustment. A processing movement. The movement of an animal receiving information and considering it. Sarah raised her left hand, slowly. Each motion deliberate and readable, designed to communicate exactly what it was and nothing beyond it. She pulled back her sleeve. The tattoo was small. People who had seen it over the years rarely knew what it was: geometric lines with a specific inset symbol that carried no meaning to civilians and carried precise meaning to the people who had earned the right to wear it. The emblem of the 38th Rescue Squadron. Combat, search, and rescue. The ones who deploy when there is no one else left to send, that others may live. Ghost looked at the tattoo, and then the dog sat down. Not slowly, not with the cautious, uncertain quality of an animal being managed or coaxed. He sat cleanly and decisively, the way a well-trained dog sits when it has received information it recognizes, when something in the environment has resolved a question it was holding. Walsh made a sound. It may have been a word. It was difficult to determine. Sarah lowered her sleeve and covered the last 4 feet to the gurney in 2 steps. She looked at the field medic. "Talk to me," she said. The medic blinked, and in that blink was a whole paragraph about how unexpected this moment was. "GSW upper right thorax. I believe we have a nicked subclavian. Entry is clean, but the hemorrhage is internal. I have been maintaining pressure, but he is not holding. Current pressure, 68/38. That was 90 seconds ago. Sat, 81 and going the wrong direction." Sarah turned and faced the room. All of it, every person in it, and the quality of her voice changed in a way that none of them could fully describe afterward, but all remembered clearly. It was not louder, it was simply different. It was the voice of someone who has made decisions in the dark with no margin for error, who has lived with the weight of those decisions and has not been broken by them. "Crash cart to my left, chest tray open and ready, 2 units of O-negative running now, and someone get Dr. Briggs gloved because we are opening this chest in 60 seconds, whether he is ready or not." 1 second of silence, and then the room moved. Briggs stood at the center of it, watching his trauma bay reorganize itself around a nurse he had dismissed without a second thought on 100 separate occasions. His face was doing something complex. His mouth came open. "On whose authority?" "His." Sarah did not look up from Reyes. She meant the man on the table who had, in the last 30 seconds, found her wrist with his hand and was holding on with the grip of a man fighting toward consciousness. "He is still here. Our job is to make sure he stays that way. Are you with me, doctor, or are you not?" Briggs stared at her across the body of the man between them. Ghost sat at the foot of the gurney, perfectly still, watching everything. Every few seconds his gaze found Sarah and held there for a moment before returning to Reyes. Like he was watching over both of them now. Like a decision had been made. Walsh had moved to the wall. Beside him, Kingston leaned in low. "That tattoo," Kingston said. "Is that what I think it is?" Walsh did not answer right away. He was watching Sarah's hands. The precision of them. The way she anticipated Briggs's needs before he articulated them. The way she moved inside the chaos of the trauma bay with the ease of someone who had learned this rhythm somewhere louder and higher stakes and considerably less forgiving. "Yeah," Walsh said. "That is what you think it is." "She is a nurse." Walsh was quiet for a moment. "She is a lot of things." The monitor screamed. Reyes's pressure dropped. The number flashed red, and in the same instant, Sarah's hands were already moving, her voice already calling out the sequence of interventions steady and clear, and without a single wasted syllable, the voice of someone who has made peace with the fact that fear is a luxury that the moment cannot afford. Briggs moved. Whatever had held him in place, whatever combination of surprise and ego, and the disorientation of being outmaneuvered in his own domain, broke when the monitor alarmed. Because whatever else Marcus Briggs was, he was a surgeon, and a surgeon's body knows what to do when blood pressure falls regardless of what the rest of him thinks about the situation. He crossed the room in 4 steps. Gloves going on, eyes sharp with the specific clarified focus of a man returning to the thing he was made for. "Chest tray," he said. "Already open," Sarah said. Their eyes met across the patient. 1 second, no more, and the work began. Outside the South Bay doors, the hospital moved forward the way it always did. The hum of equipment, the chime of call buttons, the distant intercom calling a physician to radiology. The ordinary sound of a building that exists inside emergencies day after day, crisis after crisis, an institution that keeps functioning by never fully registering the weight of any single moment. But inside Bay South, everything had changed, quietly, without announcement, even if not everyone in that room had the words for it yet. Even if the woman standing at the head of that table would have preferred it had stayed unremarkable the way she had worked so carefully to stay unremarkable for 4 years now, in a life that was supposed to be the quiet life, the safe life, the life she had chosen deliberately when she had walked away from the other one. Sarah Calloway worked. She did not look up. She did not explain herself. She did not seek confirmation or recognition or even acknowledgement. She simply worked the way she had always worked when it mattered most with everything she had and nothing held in reserve, because the man on that table needed her to. And in the end, that was the only reason that had ever been sufficient. The chest tray was open, the monitors were still screaming, and Marcus Briggs was operating in a trauma bay that no longer belonged to him in the way it had 20 minutes ago. And some part of him knew it, even if the rest of him had not yet decided what to do with that knowledge. Sarah stood across from him, her hands moving in the practiced cadence of someone who had learned surgical assist not from a textbook, but from necessity in conditions that made this sterile bay feel almost leisurely by comparison. She did not narrate her actions. She simply performed them, the retractor placed before he asked for it, the suction cleared before the field was compromised, the pressure gauge checked and relayed in a quiet, continuous stream that Briggs had somewhere in the last several minutes stopped questioning and started relying on. Pressure is climbing, she said. 69/42. I need visualization on the subclavian. Moving the retractor now. Better, hold that. The field medic, whose name turned out to be Corporal Tate, stood at the edge of the bay in the particular stillness of a man whose job has been taken from him and who is not entirely sure whether to be relieved or offended. He had his hands clasped in front of him, eyes tracking Sarah's movements with an expression that had started as skepticism and was in the process of becoming something else entirely. Walsh had not moved from the wall. Kingston was beside him. The third operator, a woman named Diaz, had taken a position near the door, one eye on the room and one on the corridor outside, the habitual alertness of someone who has never fully left the field, even when the field is technically behind them. Ghost remained at the foot of the gurney. He was not relaxed. A dog like Ghost was never fully relaxed in an unfamiliar space with a wounded handler. But he was still, and that stillness was everything. Every few seconds he looked at Sarah. Each time his gaze held for just a moment longer than the last. Tate noticed this. He leaned slightly toward Walsh. Has he done that before with someone outside the unit? Walsh kept his eyes on the bay. No. Never, not once in 3 years. Tate was quiet for a moment, then carefully, as if testing the weight of the question before committing to it, what did she show him? Walsh did not answer immediately. He watched Sarah guide Briggs' hand with a single word, just one left, and saw Briggs follow without hesitation. Watched her check the monitor, adjust the line pressure, maintain the field all simultaneously, all without anything that resembled effort. Something he recognized, Walsh said. The monitors shifted. The screaming quality of them softened. The numbers moved in the right direction, still critical, still demanding, but moving. Reyes's oxygen saturation climbed from 81 to 86. His pressure held at 69, then nudged towards 71. He is responding, Briggs said. He said it with the neutral efficiency of a surgeon reporting facts, but something in his voice had changed. The particular authority he carried in that room, the weight of it, the automatic expectation that it would go unquestioned, had thinned in a way he could feel but could not name. The bleed is controlled, but we need him in OR2, Sarah said. He needs the full repair, not a patch. I am aware of what he needs. OR2 is open. I already confirmed it. Briggs looked up at her over the patient. It was a short look. 3 seconds, maybe 4. But in those 3 seconds, a conversation happened that required no words. The version of Marcus Briggs that had walked into that bay 50 minutes ago would have responded to this moment with the dismissal he had deployed 1,000 times, quiet, efficient, damaging. The version of Marcus Briggs standing here now had watched this woman stabilize a patient he had privately assessed as non-survivable with a combat dog sitting at her feet as if she had earned that position through some authority he did not yet fully understand. He looked back down at the field. "Call or two," he said. "Tell them we are 90 seconds out." Well, Patricia, who had materialized at the bay door somewhere in the last 15 minutes and had been watching with the focused silence of a woman cataloging everything, picked up the phone. It was at that precise moment that the man on the table opened his eyes. Not fully, not with any great clarity of consciousness, but his eyes opened dark and glassy and searching, and they moved across the faces above him with the slow, expensive effort of a man pushing back against the current of his own body. He found Briggs, he found Tate, he found Walsh, who exhaled audibly the moment those eyes landed on him. And then he found Sarah. He looked at her for a long time. His lips moved. No sound came out. He tried again. "Who?" The word cost him. He closed his eyes for a moment, gathered whatever resource remained available to him, and tried once more. "Who are you?" Sarah's voice did not change. Not in register, not in pace, not in the practiced steadiness that had carried the room for the last hour. "Someone who is going to make sure you are still here tomorrow. That is enough for now." Reyes looked at her. His eyes were drifting, the pull of blood loss and medication doing what they do. But his hand found her wrist again, the same grip as before, and held it. "Ghost," he said, "not a question, a check." "He is here," Sarah said, "and he has been with you the whole time. He is fine." The exhale that came out of Reyes then was not the exhale of a man releasing pain. It was the exhale of a man releasing a weight he had been carrying since the moment he went down. The particular relief of a person who loves something and has been uncertain whether it still exists and has just been told it does. Ghost made a sound, low, not distress, something else. Sarah did not look at the dog, but she heard it, and she felt it somewhere she would not have known how to locate on a map of herself. "Or two, Bain," Briggs said. "Now." The gurney moved. Walsh fell in alongside it, one hand on the rail. Ghost moved with it, automatic lead taut body angled toward Reyes. Tate grabbed the far side. Sarah stayed at the head, one hand maintaining the IV line eyes on the monitor clipped to the gurney rail. The doors opened and they moved into the corridor, and the hospital swallowed them into its noise, the ordinary machinery of the place continuing without ceremony, as it always did, as it always would. Patricia was waiting by the elevator. She looked at Sarah. Just looked. The look contained several things: surprise and something that might have been recognition, and something else underneath that, the particular expression of a woman who has suspected something about a person for a long time and has just seen confirmation of it arrive in a form she did not anticipate. "Or two is prepped," Patricia said. "Cardiovascular team is scrubbing." "Thank you," Sarah said. "You want to tell me what just happened in there?" "I stabilized a patient." Sarah looked at her. This was the first time she had let herself look at Patricia directly since the bay, the first moment she allowed the guard that had been holding everything in its proper place to show itself as a guard rather than simply her face. "I stabilized a patient," she said again, and in her voice was the quiet, immovable firmness of a woman who has decided exactly how much of herself she is going to give to this moment. "The rest is not important right now." Patricia looked at her for another breath. Then she stepped back and let the gurney pass. The elevator doors closed. Walsh was watching Sarah from the corner of his eye the entire ride up. He did not say anything. He was building something in his head, a picture assembled from pieces that tattooed the dog, the way her hands had moved over the chest tray, the way Briggs had followed her lead without quite realizing he was doing it. Each piece fit against the others with a precision that told him the picture was accurate, even though it contradicted everything the hospital had communicated about who Sarah Calloway was. The elevator opened on the surgical floor. The cardiovascular team was in the corridor, scrubbed and ready, and Briggs moved into the stream of them with the automatic authority of a man returning to his native element. Reyes was taken into OR2, and the doors swung shut, and the corridor went quiet in that particular post-crisis way, the adrenaline still present, but without a destination, nowhere to go now. But down. Walsh turned. Sarah was standing at the end of the corridor, her back to the OR doors, looking out the window at the city below. Her arms were at her sides. She was breathing slowly, the deliberate breathing of someone who knows what happens when they stop. Walsh walked over. He stood beside her. Not close, just close enough to make clear that what he was doing was intentional. "You want to tell me," he said, "how a trauma nurse knows the hand signal for a type 1 working dog de-escalation?" Sarah said nothing. "Because that is a 40-hour Special Operations K-9 course. It is not exactly on the nursing school curriculum." Still nothing. Walsh let the silence sit for a moment. Then he said quietly, without any edge in it, "Ma'am, with respect, I have been in enough rooms with enough people to know when someone has been downrange. I am not asking you to explain yourself. I am just asking you to not pretend that I am imagining something I am not imagining." Sarah turned and looked at him. The full look, the one she did not give to most people, the one that contained, if you were paying attention, a great deal of information about what a person had lived through and how they had chosen to carry it. "I did a job," she said. "It was a long time ago. Now I do a different job. 38th Rescue Squadron." She did not confirm it, and she did not deny it. She looked at him with the level steadiness of a person who has made peace with being seen and is simply waiting to find out what the other person intends to do with the seeing. Walsh nodded once, the nod of a man receiving an answer in the form it was given and respecting that form. "My commanding officer," he said, and his voice shifted, stripped of the operational flatness. Just a person's voice, now lower and more honest. "Went down on a ridge in a place I am not going to name 4 years ago. The squadron that extracted him. The medic who kept him alive for 6 hours in a destroyed building with one hand and a field kit and nothing else." He stopped. "That medic had a tattoo." Sarah looked out the window. "He talked about her for 6 months, Walsh said. Called her the steadiest person he had ever seen in the field. Said she had this quality where the worse things got, the calmer she became. Like she ran on a different system than the rest of us." A pause. "I always thought that sounded like a story someone tells about a person they have mythologized. Now I am less sure." The corridor was quiet. "Reyes is going to make it," Sarah said, not a comfort. A statement of fact delivered with the certainty of someone who has made the assessment and is standing behind it. "Briggs is exceptional when someone points him in the right direction. The bleed is controlled. He has good blood pressure now. He is going to be fine." Walsh let out a breath that he had been holding, she realized, for considerably longer than the last few minutes. "Thank you," he said, and in those 2 words was the full weight of everything the operational report would never capture. The hours in the field, the flight back, the certainty during that flight that they were too late, the 4 minutes in the trauma bay when nothing was working and the numbers kept falling. "Love it, 2 words. Sarah looked at him. "Take care of your hand," she said. "That bite needs a proper wash and a course of antibiotics. Come down to the ER before you leave." Walsh almost smiled. It was a real smile, the reluctant kind, the kind that arrives before a person has consciously decided to allow it. "Yes, ma'am." She walked back toward the elevator. She pressed the button, waited. The doors opened and she stepped in and turned and stood with her hands at her sides and watched the corridor through the closing gap. Walsh was still standing at the window. Kingston had joined him. They were both watching the elevator doors. She let them close. In the elevator alone for the first time in hours, Sarah leaned her back against the wall. Just for a moment, just for the duration of the descent. She did not close her eyes, and she did not make any sound, and she did not allow herself the particular luxury of feeling the full weight of the last 90 minutes, because if she started, she was not confident she would stop. And she had 3 more hours left on her shift. And there were other patients, other families, other moments that required what she had. She breathed. In for 4, out for 6. The pattern she had learned in a room that smelled like engine exhaust and desert dust from a woman named Chief Vasquez, who had told her that the breath is the one thing the situation cannot take from you. You own it, every single one. The elevator opened. She walked out. Patricia was at the nurse's station. She looked up. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Bay 4, 12-year-old with a broken radius. Mother is beside herself." "On my way," Sarah said. She walked down the hall. She passed the supply room where she had been standing when the radio crackled and all of this began. She passed the desk where the overnight chart still had Reyes's admission filed under unknown military personnel because there had been no time for paperwork. She passed 3 of her colleagues who watched her as she went quietly with the particular attention of people who have witnessed something that has rearranged their understanding of a person they thought they knew. None of them said anything to her. She did not ask them to. Bay 4. She pushed the door open, and inside was a boy with a splinted arm and terrified eyes, and a mother on the edge of the particular cliff that parents stand on when their child is hurt, and they cannot fix it. Sarah looked at them both. The assessment was automatic, thorough, instant. The mother was 3 minutes from crying. The boy was pretending to be fine with an effort that was quietly breaking her heart. She pulled up the rolling stool and sat down to their level, and said in the voice that had no trace of the OR, no trace of the trauma bay, no trace of any of it. Simply the voice of a person who had decided to be fully present for the person in front of her. "Hi, tell me where it hurts," the boy told her. Sarah listened. She listened the way you listen when you understand that being heard is for most people almost as important as being helped. She asked questions. She made a note. She explained what was going to happen next in language that a 12-year-old could hold on to concrete and calm and free of the clinical vocabulary that turns fear into confusion. The mother's shoulders slowly descended from where they had been somewhere around her ears. "Is he going to be okay?" the mother asked. The real question underneath the question, the one that parents ask in 100 different configurations whenever their child is anywhere near a hospital bed. Sarah looked at the woman. "Yes," she said, directly. No caveat, no qualifier. "He is going to be just fine." The mother pressed her lips together, nodded, the specific nod of a person receiving something they needed badly and are not quite sure they are allowed to feel relieved by yet. Sarah finished the assessment, updated the chart, stepped out to request the orthopedic consult. She was at the desk typing when her pager went off. She looked down at it. The number was one she did not recognize. The message was 4 words. She read them once, then again. Then she stood very still for exactly 3 seconds, the tablet held loosely in her hands, her face doing nothing that anyone observing her could have interpreted as unusual. She set the tablet down. She typed one final note into the chart. She clipped her pager back to her waist. She walked to the window at the end of the hall, the one that looked north toward the bay, toward the horizon, where the sky and the water became indistinguishable from each other in the flat afternoon light. She stood there for 6 seconds, counting them, feeling the weight of each one. Then she turned and walked back into the unit. Because whatever that message meant, whatever was coming next, it was not arriving in this moment. In this moment, there was a boy with a broken radius and a mother trying not to fall apart, and a unit full of people who needed her here. She could only be where she was. She had learned that, hard and once, and she had not forgotten it. Down the hall in the OR suite, David Reyes's blood pressure stabilized at 104/63, and the cardiovascular team exhaled as a unit, and Briggs asked for the closing suture with the quiet efficiency of a man finishing what someone else started. And Ghost, who had been made to wait outside the OR doors, sat in the corridor with his chin on his paws and his eyes fixed on the door and did not move. He was still waiting when the lights in the corridor shifted with the afternoon, the day turning over into its next hour, the hospital continuing its endless rotation of emergencies and recoveries, arrivals and departures, the ordinary, extraordinary business of keeping people alive. Sarah was 3 bays down, changing a dressing, explaining the aftercare to a woman who would not remember half of what was said but would remember the tone of it, the steadiness of it, the feeling of being spoken to by someone who was completely, genuinely there. She was there. She was always there. That was the thing no one had understood about her yet, the thing the tattoo and the May and the trauma bay had only begun to make visible. She was always entirely there, no part of her anywhere else. And for the people in those bays, on those gurneys, in those chairs, frightened and in pain and reaching for something stable to hold on to, that presence was not a small thing. It was, in fact, everything. The 4 words on the pager were still sitting in Sarah's chest like a stone dropped into still water, sending out rings she could not stop even when she needed to. She had read them 3 times. She was not someone who needed to read things 3 times. Her retention was clinical, precise, a function of training that had burned certain neurological pathways deeper than others. She had read them 3 times because the first time she did not believe them, the second time she confirmed that she had read them correctly, and the third time she was deciding what they meant for everything that came after. The 4 words were, "They know you are here." She did not know who sent it. The number was blocked. The pager system at Sharp Memorial was internal, routed through the hospital's own network, which meant the message had come from inside the building or from someone with access to the internal routing system. Neither of those possibilities was comfortable. She had stood at that window for 6 seconds and cataloged both of them and reached the same conclusion each time. She could not determine the source without more information, and she could not get more information standing at a window, so she would work and she would watch and she would wait. This was not the first time in her life she had been required to function normally while something dangerous moved at the edge of her peripheral vision. It was, however, the first time it had happened in a hospital in San Diego, and that distinction mattered in ways she was still working out. The afternoon moved forward the way afternoons do in a trauma unit at 2 speeds simultaneously, unbearably fast inside each individual crisis and strangely slow in the spaces between them. Sarah worked through both speeds with the same steadiness she had brought to everything that day. She changed the dressing in Bay 4. She sat with the mother until the orthopedic consult arrived. She handled 2 more admissions, one a construction fall and one a cardiac event in a 68-year-old retired teacher named Harold, who told her 3 separate jokes while she ran his EKG and managed, despite everything, to make her almost smile. At 12 minutes past 2, Patricia stopped her in the corridor. "Hospital administration wants to see you," Patricia said. Her voice was level in the way of a woman who has prepared her voice to be level. Sarah looked at her. "Now, in 20 minutes, conference room B, 4th floor. Patricia paused. "Briggs is already up there." The stone in Sarah's chest shifted. "What is this about?" Patricia pressed her lips together, the particular expression of a person who has been told something and has been told not to repeat it and is finding the combination of those 2 things uncomfortable. "I think you know what it is about." Sarah held her gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once and went to check on Harold because Harold was expecting her to bring his chart back with the EKG results, and Harold had been waiting patiently, and Harold did not have any part in whatever was happening on the 4th floor. That mattered. She had learned in a life that had occasionally required her to hold 2 completely contradictory realities at the same time, that you could not let the large thing devour the small thing. The small thing was often the point. She told Harold his heart rate was better than expected and that the second joke had been funnier than the first, but he should never repeat the third one in public. He laughed. It was a real laugh, the good kind, the kind that briefly makes a hospital room feel like something else entirely. She took the stairs to the 4th floor. Conference room B had a long table and too many chairs. The specific aesthetic of a room designed for accountability meetings, the kind of room where institutional language gets deployed as a weapon or a shield depending on which side of the table you were seated on. Sarah arrived 3 minutes early. She was always early. Early was a form of information. Briggs was there. He was seated with his arms on the table and his hands folded, which she recognized as the posture of a man who had been sitting for long enough to have shifted from discomfort to resignation. Beside him was a woman Sarah did not recognize. 50s, silver-framed glasses, charcoal blazer, the particular groomed composure of someone in hospital administration whose job was to manage situations that had gone outside the expected parameters. Her name, as she introduced herself without standing, was Director Eleanor Marsh. On the other side of the table, and this was the detail that landed with the specific weight of the thing, sat a man in civilian clothes who had not been there a minute ago, who had entered through the side door that connected to the adjacent office, and who was looking at Sarah with the kind of attention that is not casual and was never intended to appear casual. She knew his face. It took her less than a second to place it. She had last seen it 4 years ago in a debrief room in a building she was not permitted to name the location of in the last weeks before she submitted her separation papers. His name was Colonel James Ardell, United States Air Force, retired from official service as of 2 years ago, which she also knew because she had made it her business to know quietly and thoroughly before she accepted the position at Sharp Memorial. Her face gave nothing. "Nurse Calloway," Marsh said, "please sit down." Sarah sat down. She put her hands on the table in front of her, open, relaxed. Her breathing was even. Her posture was neither defensive nor performatively open. She had sat in rooms like this before. She had sat in rooms considerably more adversarial than this one. The chair was the same, the table was different. The fundamental dynamic was one she could navigate. "We appreciate you coming up," Marsh began. "I was told 20 minutes, Sarah said. "I'm here in 17. What is this about?" Marsh glanced at Briggs. Briggs looked at the table. Ardell said nothing. He was watching her with the attentiveness of a man reading a document he has memorized but still wants to verify. "We are aware," Marsh said carefully, "that there was an incident in the trauma bay this morning involving a military patient and a working dog. We have received accounts from several staff members and from the military team who accompanied the patient." She set a thin folder on the table and did not open it. "The accounts are consistent. They are also, from an administrative standpoint, somewhat complicated." "How so?" Sarah said. "You are a trauma nurse, Nurse Calloway, not a surgeon, not a trauma attending. The protocols for who may direct care in a trauma bay are clearly established." Marsh's voice was measured professional, the voice of a woman who had delivered this specific category of message many times and had refined the delivery to its most frictionless form. "The accounts we have received suggest that you assumed a directing role during this morning's procedure. That is outside the scope of your position." "The patient was in cardiac compromise and no one was moving," Sarah said. "I directed traffic until the attending physician was able to engage. That is standard nursing protocol in a crisis scenario." "You countermanded the attending physician's instructions." "I provided an alternate clinical recommendation in a situation where the attending physician's instructions would have resulted in patient death. There is a distinction." Briggs made a sound, not a word, a sound. Sarah looked at him. He looked back at her, and this was the moment she saw it, the thing she had been watching for since she walked in. He was not angry. She had expected anger because anger was his default currency, the coin he spent most freely. He was not angry. He was something more complicated than angry, uncomfortable and unsettled, and unwilling to fully commit to either the position Marsh was articulating or the position that contradicted it, because both of those positions required him to say something definitive about this morning, and he was not yet ready to do that. "Dr. Briggs," she said directly, "Reyes is alive." Briggs looked at her. "He is in recovery on the 3rd floor. His pressure is stable at 110/70. The subclavian repair held. He is going to wake up and he is going to be fine. And the reason he is going to be fine is because the procedure that was performed on him this morning was correct." She paused. "You know that?" Briggs was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he said, "That is not what is being discussed here." "What is being discussed here?" said Ardell. Everyone turned. It was the first time he had spoken, and the quality of his voice was different from the room it entered, calm and low, and carrying the specific density of a person accustomed to rooms that rearrange themselves when he speaks. Marsh looked at him with the measured expression of a woman recalibrating. "What is being discussed here," Ardell said again, "is whether Nurse Calloway's background is going to become a matter of institutional record at this facility." He was looking at Marsh now, not at Sarah. And the answer to that question is that it is not. Her service record, her designations, her operational history, none of that is going to be documented in a hospital file or referenced in an administrative proceeding. That is not a request. He set his hand flat on the table. That is how it is. Marsh took off her glasses. She looked at them for a moment, then set them down on the folder. "Mr. Ardell, this hospital has its own protocols and liability considerations that—" "I understand that," Ardell said, "and I am telling you that those considerations are going to be satisfied by the fact that your patient is alive and the procedure was documented as a standard trauma intervention under Dr. Briggs' supervision." He finally looked at Sarah, which is exactly what it was. Silence. Sarah kept her hands flat on the table. She was watching Ardell with the same careful attention she gave to things she did not yet fully understand, open, precise, taking it in, without deciding too quickly what it meant. Briggs pushed back from the table. He stood and he did something then that Sarah had not anticipated, not because it was dramatic, but because it was quiet. He looked at her directly without the professional apparatus he usually arranged between himself and people he was required to acknowledge. And he said, "The repair held because the field was prepared correctly. That is a fact." He picked up his coat from the chair. "I'm going to check on my patient." He walked out. The room was not the same after he left. Rooms rarely were when a person left them having said something true they had not intended to say. Marsh was looking at Sarah with an expression that contained several layers, some administrative, some personal, some belonging to a woman who had reached a certain age and recognized when she saw it the particular quality of someone who had paid a price she herself had not been asked to pay. We are going to need to review your application documentation, Marsh said. There are some discrepancies between your listed employment history and what has come to light today. My application was accurate, Sarah said. I listed my military service. The specific designation and operational unit were classified and remain so. I listed what I was permitted to list. And the clinical skills you demonstrated today are within the scope of practice for a nurse with my level of trauma experience. She paused. I listed my trauma certifications on my application. All of them. Marsh looked at the folder without opening it. You listed TCCC certification. That is correct. That is a battlefield medical certification. It is used in a wide range of emergency context. Marsh leaned back in her chair. There was something working behind her eyes, the specific calculation of a person determining what the situation actually required from them versus what it had initially appeared to require. It was the calculation of a woman who had gotten to her position not by being inflexible, but by knowing when rigidity stopped serving a purpose. Dr. Briggs' supervision credit stands, she said finally. The incident report will reflect standard trauma intervention protocol. A beat. I will also need you to report to HR for a documentation update. Of course, Monday. Monday, Sarah agreed. Marsh stood. She picked up the folder. She paused at the door and turned back once, not all the way, just enough to address the room. The patient you helped save this morning has a family, Nurse Calloway, a wife, 2 daughters. They arrived an hour ago. She held the door handle. I thought you should know that. She left. Ardell and Sarah were alone in the room. He did not speak immediately. He looked at the table, at the empty chairs, at the afternoon light coming through the narrow window at the end of the room, and he had the appearance of a man performing a mental inventory, checking to see what was still in its proper place and what had shifted. You knew I was here, Sarah said. Yes. How long? Since you were hired. He met her eyes. You were not hidden, Sarah. You were just quiet. Those are not the same thing. She absorbed this. The pager message. Something moved across his face, quick, almost invisible. That was not from me. She looked at him. I found out about it 40 minutes ago, he said. That is why I am here in person instead of by phone. He straightened in his chair. Someone is running a background poll on your service history, not through standard channels, through a third-party contractor with DO'd access. The temperature of the room did not change, but something changed in it anyway, in the quality of the silence, the way it pressed. Who, she said, that is what I am trying to establish. His voice was careful in the way of a man carrying something fragile. The query was flagged because it touched records that are still active classification. Your designation, your operational history, specific actions performed during your final deployment cycle. All of it is still sealed. A pause. Someone is trying to unseal it. Sarah looked at her hands on the table. Then she said, the team that came in with Reyes this morning, Walsh and his unit, how much do they know? Walsh recognized the tattoo. He made an inquiry through standard military channels this afternoon. That inquiry is clean. It is the kind of thing an operator makes when he wants to know who helped save his commanding officer. That is not the issue. Ardell folded his hands. The issue is the query that came in before Walsh's. 4 hours before the team even arrived at this hospital, he let that land. Someone knew you were going to be involved before you were involved. Sarah went very still. 4 hours before the team arrived. She had been in Bay 3 at that point. She had been resetting an IV line for a 70-year-old man who wanted to call his daughter. She had been exactly where she always was, invisible and present, and doing the quiet work that constituted her life here. 4 hours before. You are saying this was not about Reyes, she said. I am saying I do not know yet what it was about. His voice was steady, but his eyes were not, and the distinction was one that only a person trained to read people at a high level of accuracy would have noticed. Ardell was worried, not the surface worry of a person dealing with an administrative complication. The deeper kind, the kind that arrives when a pattern completes itself in a way that the person reading it had hoped it would not. I am saying that you have been very careful for 4 years, and that someone with significant resources and access has just demonstrated that careful is not invisible. Sarah looked at the door Marsh had closed behind her, then at the window, then at her own hands, which were as steady as they had always been, which had never once shaken in a crisis, which she had sometimes hated for that quality, because it made it easy to forget that the stillness was not the absence of fear, it was the management of it. "You came here to warn me," she said. "I came here because it is my job to contain exposure when it occurs," Ardell said. "But yes, I also came to warn you. And what do you want me to do with the warning?" He looked at her for a long time, the look of a man who has come with a prepared answer and is not entirely sure it still fits. "I want you to be careful." "I have been careful." "Be more careful." Sarah stood. She straightened her scrubs in the automatic, unconscious way of someone who has dressed in uniforms for most of her adult life. She picked up her tablet from the chair where she had set it. She looked at Ardell. "Someone is in the hospital," she said. "Right now. That pager message came from inside this building." "We do not know that." "I know that." She said it without volume, without drama, with the flat and specific certainty of a person who has run the logic and arrived at the only conclusion it supports. The routing, the timing, the 4 words, not more, not less. Someone who knew exactly what those 4 words would communicate. That is not a remote query. That is someone who is in this building and wanted me to know it. She looked at the door. The question is whether they wanted me to run or whether they wanted me to stay. Ardell stood. And in the movement was something she had not expected. Not adjustment or repositioning, but the deliberate, unhurried bearing of a man who has decided to stop managing the situation from a comfortable distance and step into it. "I have 2 people in the building," Ortiz said. "They have been here since I arrived." "I know," she said. "The man at the end of the corridor on the 3rd floor who has been watching the elevator since 1:15, and the woman in the lobby who has been reading the same magazine for 40 minutes. She paused. "Tell them the day shift change is in 30 minutes. The 4th floor stairwell will be empty until 4:15. If someone is moving in this building with access to the internal pager system and knowledge of my service history, that is where they will go." Ardell stared at her. She walked to the door. She put her hand on the handle and stopped, without turning. "Reyes's family is on the 3rd floor. I know. They should not be alone right now." She opened the door and stepped out into the corridor and walked toward the elevator, and her pace was exactly what it had been at 6:45 that morning, purposeful and quiet and drawing no particular attention from anyone she passed. She looked like a nurse returning to her unit. She looked like a woman going about her ordinary day, which is exactly what she wanted. In the conference room behind her, Ardell took out his phone and made a call that lasted 11 seconds. Then he took out a different phone and made a call that lasted 4. Then he walked to the window and looked at the building across the street and said nothing, and thought several things, one of which was that he had been doing this job for 22 years, and Sarah Calloway was still, after all of it, the sharpest person he had ever put in the field. Another of which was that he was afraid he had led something directly to her door. And a third, quieter and more honest than the others, which was that if anyone was equipped to handle what was coming, it was the woman currently walking down the 4th floor corridor in hospital scrubs, with her hands at her sides and her breathing perfectly controlled, moving toward the next thing the way she had always moved toward the next thing, without hesitation, without armor, and without leaving a single person behind her who was not safe. The elevator doors opened on the 3rd floor and Sarah stepped out, and the first thing she registered was the family. She had known they were there. Marsh had told her. But knowing and seeing are different things, and the seeing landed in the particular place that clinical knowledge cannot reach the place that remains human, regardless of how much training you build around it. Reyes's wife was sitting in the corridor outside the recovery suite, not in the waiting area where the hospital preferred families to contain their grief, but directly in the corridor in one of the hard plastic chairs that lined the wall, with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap and her eyes fixed on the door at the end of the hall. She was in her mid-30s, dark-haired, with the composed and watchful quality of a woman who had spent years learning to receive bad news from a distance and had developed in response a stillness that looked like calm but was actually something more like endurance. Behind her were 2 girls. The older one was perhaps 9, sitting in the chair, with her knees pulled up, watching her mother watch the door. The younger one was asleep across 2 chairs, with her head in her mother's lap, her small face slack with the deep, uncomplicated trust of a child who does not yet know what the door at the end of the hall might mean. Sarah stopped. Walsh was there too, standing a few feet from the family, his bandaged hand held slightly away from his body. He was not hovering. He was simply present in the manner of a man who had decided that the most useful thing he could offer in this moment was proximity. Kingston was beside him, and Diaz was at the end of the corridor, hands in her jacket pockets, watching the elevators. She saw Sarah, and her eyes tracked her the entire length of the corridor. Walsh turned. He read her face in the way of a person trained to read faces quickly and accurately, and whatever he found there made him stand up slightly straighter. "Calloway," he said. "How long have they been here?" she said quietly enough that the family would not hear. "About an hour." His voice matched hers. "Elena, that is his wife. She drove up from Coronado the moment we called. She does not know the full situation yet. We told her the surgery was successful." He paused. "We did not tell her everything." "What did you leave out?" Walsh glanced toward Diaz at the end of the corridor and then back. "When we extracted Reyes, it was not a standard engagement gone wrong. It was a targeted hit." He said it plainly, the way people state dangerous facts when there is no comfortable alternative. Someone knew his route, his schedule, his team composition. That level of specificity does not come from surveillance. It comes from access. Sarah processed this without changing her expression. "You have a leak." "We have had a leak for 6 weeks. We have been trying to identify the source quietly without alerting whoever is on the other end." Reyes was running a parallel track on the same investigation. Walsh looked at the door at the end of the corridor. He got too close. The stone in Sarah's chest, the one that had been there since the pager message, shifted again. It was changing shape, moving from the manageable weight of personal exposure into something with wider dimensions and more dangerous edges. She thought about Ardell's words. 4 hours before the team arrived. Someone knew before it happened. "The background query on my service record," she said. Walsh's eyes came back to her. "What query?" "Someone ran a third-party pull on my classified operational history this morning. It was flagged. The timing was 4 hours before your team arrived here." She watched his face. "That is not a coincidence." Walsh was very still. The particular stillness of a man assembling pieces that have just snapped together in a way he did not expect and is not sure he is ready for. "You are saying whoever hit Reyes has an interest in you. I am saying the timing requires an explanation, and I do not have one yet." She looked past him toward the family. "But I want to know why Reyes was running the investigation, who he identified as a likely source of the leak, and whether that information survived him getting shot." "It survived," Walsh said. "He sent an encrypted file before we extracted. 48 characters standard protocol. We have not been able to open it. The key is..." He stopped. "The key is what?" Sarah said. Walsh looked at her with the expression of a man arriving at an uncomfortable realization in real time. "He told me 2 days before the operation that if something went wrong, the key would be with someone he trusted who was not in the unit, someone outside the system." Silence. Sarah looked at him. "He said I would know who it was when the time came," Walsh said. "He said she would know too." He was looking at her in a way that was no longer tactical or operational or professionally filtered. He was looking at her the way a person looks at another person when the shape of something improbable has just become the shape of something true. Sarah turned and walked to the end of the corridor. Diaz watched her come. She was younger than she appeared from a distance, late 20s, with dark eyes that carried the focused intelligence of someone who observed more than she disclosed. She did not move as Sarah approached. She waited. "The stairwell door," Sarah said. "Has anyone come through it in the last 30 minutes?" Diaz said, "You are the second person to ask me that." Sarah stopped. "Who was the first?" "Man came through about 45 minutes ago. Civilian clothes, but he moved wrong." She said it without elaboration in the precise language of someone who knows that how a person moves through a building is a form of information. "I clocked him. He did not look at the family. He looked at the room numbers." "Did he go into recovery?" "No. He stopped at the nursing station, asked about a patient named Thompson. There is no patient named Thompson on this floor." Diaz paused. "I checked." The corridor was very quiet for the 2 seconds it took Sarah to make a decision. Where did he go after that? Elevator. Going up. Up meant the fourth floor. The fourth floor meant conference room B, which was empty now, and the adjacent administrative offices and the fourth floor stairwell that Sarah had told Ardell would be empty until 4:15. She checked her watch. It was 4:07. She walked back to Walsh. Your people on this floor, are they armed? Walsh did not ask why. Diaz is, Kingston is not. I need you to move the family, not out of the building, down to the second floor family room, the one off the main atrium. It has 2 exits and it is always staffed. Keep them there. She looked at Walsh directly. And do not let anyone tell Elena anything about her husband's condition until I get back. Where are you going? 4th floor. Walsh took 1 step toward her. Then I am going with you. You have a wounded hand and a family to move. She said it without unkindness and without negotiation. I need you here. Walsh held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then something in his face did what it did when a person makes the decision to trust someone in a context where trust is earned and not given, and the earning had been done and the decision was being made. Calloway. He said her name the way he would have said the name of someone in his unit. Not a title, not a designation, just her name with the weight of recognition behind it. Be careful. She was already moving toward the stairwell door. She took the stairs the way she had been trained to take them, close to the wall, weight forward, each footfall placed rather than struck. The building's ambient noise filtered through the stairwell in the particular compressed way of enclosed spaces. HV, AC, hum, distant voices. The institutional background presence of a large structure in motion. She sorted through it automatically the way she sorted through any complex audio environment, filtering out the constant and attending to the variable. She heard him before she reached the 4th floor landing. Not loudly, a single footstep on the other side of the fire door, the specific quality of weight being shifted by a person who was trying to move quietly and was not quite quiet enough. She stopped on the landing 4 steps below the door and was still, waiting. The door opened. The man who came through it was not what she expected, which meant she had expected something specific and been wrong, and being wrong was information. He was in his mid-40s, compact with the kind of generic professional appearance that was either natural or carefully constructed. He was not carrying a weapon visibly. He was carrying a phone in his left hand and a hospital visitor badge in his right. He saw her in the same moment she saw him, and his body did the involuntary thing that bodies do when they encounter an unexpected variable in a space they believe they controlled. He stopped. His weight shifted back fractionally. Then he recovered. And the recovery was smooth and practiced and told her something important about the category of person she was dealing with. Oh, sorry, he said. The tone was easy, slightly self-deprecating, the voice of a civilian who has wandered somewhere he should not have. I think I am on the wrong floor. Do you know how to get to the administrative offices? Sarah looked at him. She did not perform skepticism or suspicion. She simply looked at him with the complete level attention of a person who sees exactly what she is looking at and does not require it to present itself differently. The administrative offices are closed at this hour, she said. I was told they would be open until 5. They close at 4. She paused. Who told you they would be open until 5? His eyes moved, not to her face, to the space behind her, the landing below the stairwell walls, the root geometry. It lasted a fraction of a second. A person who was not looking for it would not have caught it. She caught it. I must have had the wrong information, he said. He half turned toward the door. I will try again tomorrow. What is the name of the patient you are here to see, she said. He turned back. The easy look had thinned slightly like paint wearing at an edge. I am sorry, Bossier. You were on the 3rd floor 45 minutes ago, asking about a patient named Thompson. There is no patient named Thompson at this hospital. She said it with the same even steadiness she gave to everything. The question I have is whether you came here because of Lieutenant Commander Reyes or because of me. The air in the stairwell changed. He looked at her, and what was in his look now was not the civilian performance. It was something stripped down and exact, and professionally appraising one person in a certain category of work, recognizing another person in the same category, and deciding in real time what the rules of engagement were. Both, he said, one word, no qualifier. And in the decision to drop the performance was its own form of information, the information of a person choosing directness, because the pretense had become more expensive than honesty. Sarah held the stairwell railing with one hand. Her voice did not change. Who are you working for? That is a question I cannot answer here. Then let me ask a different one. She took one step up, just one, enough to close the distance without triggering the defensive reflex. The encrypted file Reyes sent before extraction, the 48-character file. Someone has been trying to access it. You know what is in it. She watched his face. That is why you ran the background query on my service record. Because Reyes sent the decryption key to me. His expression shifted. It was subtle, the micro-expression of a person encountering a conclusion they had not expected the other party to reach this quickly. He recovered from it in under a second, but a second was long enough. I do not have the file, Sarah said. I have not received anything from Reyes or from anyone in his unit. If a key was sent to me, I do not know about it. She paused. But the fact that you are here tells me that whoever wants the file believes I do. And the fact that you came to the hospital in person instead of continuing in the background query tells me you are running out of time. He was quiet. The stairwell hummed around them. You are not government, she said. Your move from the 3rd floor to the 4th was too exposed. A government asset on a domestic operation would have maintained a lower profile longer. You move quickly because you have a deadline. She looked at the visitor badge in his hand. And whoever you work for, they are not the ones who shot Reyes. Because if they were, you would not be here trying to recover the file. You would already be gone. He stared at her. Then he did something that surprised her. He exhaled. A real exhale, not a performance of calm, but the actual release of a person setting down a weight. He looked at the badge in his hand, and then he looked at her. My name is Garrett, he said. I work for a private intelligence firm that has a contract relationship with the DOD. I was tasked with identifying the source of the leak that resulted in Commander Juan Reyes being shot, independently of the military investigation. He said it plainly, each sentence given the same weight as the one before it. The encrypted file Reyes and Fripius sent contains a name, one name. The name of the person inside the unit who provided the operational schedule to the people who hit him. He looked at her directly. That person is still inside the unit. They are still active, and the military investigation has not identified them yet. Sarah looked at him. Why would Reyes send the key to me? He did not know I was here. Garrett was quiet for a moment. He knew you were here. He has known for 18 months. A pause. He is the one who flagged your application to this hospital. He let that settle. He did not do it to expose you. He did it because he trusted you. And because he knew if something went wrong, you were the one person outside the system who could not be compromised. The stairwell was very quiet. Sarah took the information and held it the way she held things that were both significant and dangerous carefully without letting the weight of them shift her balance. She thought about the man on the table who had found her wrist with his hand and held on. She thought about Ghost sitting at the foot of the gurney, the decision he had made in the space of a single second. She thought about Walsh's voice saying she would know who it was when the time came. The key, she said. How would it have been delivered? Encrypted message, routed through a civilian channel that your service profile had registered before you separated. A contact address that has not been active for 4 years. Garrett paused. But a message sent to an inactive address does not disappear. It waits. Sarah was already running the inventory. The contact address he was describing was one she had used during her final deployment cycle, a civilian routing address that she had established as a secondary channel for non-operational communications. She had not accessed it since she separated. She had not thought about it in years. She had thought it did not matter anymore. When was the message sent? She said, 3 days ago, the day before the operation. 3 days, sitting in a channel she had not opened in 4 years, waiting the way messages wait without urgency, without the knowledge that the person who sent them had subsequently been shot and loaded onto a transport and brought to a hospital where the person they were addressed to was working the morning shift. I need a device, she said. Garrett reached into his jacket and produced a phone. Clean hardware, no case of model she recognized as a secure channel civilian device. He held it out. The address is already loaded. I accessed the channel this morning. The message is there. Sarah looked at the phone. She looked at Garrett. She was making the assessment that she always made in the moment before a decision that could not be undone, running the variables, weighing the probabilities, checking for the gaps in the logic where the errors lived. If I open this here, she said, and the key is valid and the name in that file is the name of someone inside Reyes's unit, what happens next? We take it to Naval Special Warfare Command through a channel that bypasses the compromise investigation. Reyes authorized that protocol when he sent the file. He anticipated exactly this scenario. Garrett's voice was steady. The person gets pulled before they know they have been identified. No exposure, no risk to the remaining team members. And the people who shot Reyes. The file contains secondary intelligence on the contracting network that hired them. It is significant. He held the phone steady. It is the kind of significant that changes careers and ends others. Sarah took the phone. She opened the channel. The message was there. Simple, direct, the compressed language of a person who had written it, knowing it might be the last thing they sent. S. If you are reading this, then you already know the situation is worse than it looks. The name in the file is attached. The key is the phrase you used when you told me why you do what you do. Word for word the way you said it. You know the one. Trust Walsh. And Sarah, thank you. For all of it. She read it twice. The phrase you used when you told me why you do what you do. She knew exactly what phrase he meant. She knew it because she had said it once 4 years ago in a debrief room in a building she was not permitted to name in response to a question she had not been expecting from a SEAL commander she had extracted from a destroyed building after 6 hours in the dark. He had asked her why she did it. Not the service, not the job. The specific thing she did, the part where she kept going when most people had already stopped. She had told him the truth. The way she always told the truth plainly and without decoration. The way a person speaks when they have no energy left for performance. She had said, because the person in front of me is still here. 9 words. She typed them into the key field. The file opened. One name. Clean text, no header, no context needed. Just a name and a rank and a unit designation. Sarah looked at it. She looked at it for a long time. Then she handed the phone to Garrett. His eyes moved to the screen. She watched his face and saw the precise moment the information landed, the fractional tightening around the eyes, the specific expression of a person confirming something they had suspected and being told by the confirmation that the situation was more serious than the suspicion had indicated. You know this person, she said. I know of him. Garrett's voice was careful. He was on the approved list for the Naval Special Warfare Command investigation. That means he has been inside the inquiry from the beginning. He looked at her. He knows everything they have found so far and everything they have not found yet. Sarah stood in the stairwell and breathed. 4 and 6 out. The pattern that had held her together in conditions considerably darker than this one. She felt the weight of the name on the phone and the weight of everything it connected to Reyes on the table. Walsh's bandaged hand, the 2 girls in the corridor with their mother watching a door. Make the call, she said. Garrett was already dialing, and Sarah turned and pushed through the fire door and walked back into the 4th floor corridor, and her pace was even and her hands were steady, and her face gave nothing away to the 2 hospital staff members she passed, who looked at her and saw a nurse on her way somewhere necessary. Behind her in the stairwell, Garrett spoke 12 words into the phone in a voice too low to carry. Somewhere else in the building, a clock was running, and Sarah walked because walking was what she did, forward and without pause toward whatever the next thing was, with 9 words sitting quietly in her chest like a key that had just opened and something that could not be closed again. Garrett's call lasted 4 minutes and 19 seconds. Sarah knew this because she counted it from the 4th floor corridor, her back against the wall beside the stairwell door. Her eyes on the elevator, her mind running the geometry of what happened next with the same automatic precision it had been running things all day. 4 minutes and 19 seconds was enough time for someone on the other end of that call to understand what they had been handed. It was enough time for them to initiate the protocol Reyes had authorized. It was also enough time for the wrong person to become aware that the protocol had been initiated if the wrong person was still in the right place. The name in the file was Commander Victor Hale, 12-year SEAL veteran currently assigned as a senior liaison officer to the Naval Special Warfare Command investigation into the operational leak that had put Reyes on a gurney in the trauma bay of Sharp Memorial Hospital that morning. Victor Hale, who had been inside the investigation for 6 weeks, who had known every avenue of inquiry, every person of interest, every piece of intelligence the investigation had accumulated, and every gap it had not yet filled. Victor Hale, who according to the secondary intelligence in Reyes' file, had been on a contractor's payroll for 14 months. Sarah had not said his name out loud yet. She had looked at it on the screen, and she had handed the phone to Garrett, and she had told him to make the call, and she had walked out of the stairwell. The name sat in her the way a diagnosis sits before it is spoken, present, insignificant, and changing the shape of everything it touched, whether or not anyone was ready to receive it. She took the elevator down to the 3rd floor. Walsh was in the corridor standing outside the family room where he had moved Elena and the girls. He turned when the elevator opened. He read her face the way he had been reading her face all day, quickly and accurately, and this time what he read made him step toward her before she had fully crossed the distance between them. "Tell me," he said, "not here." She moved past him, checked the corridor in both directions, then turned to face him, with the door to the family room behind her, her voice low and direct. Reyes sent an encrypted file before extraction. The decryption key was sent to a contact address I had not accessed in 4 years. I opened the file 20 minutes ago. She paused. "The file contains the name of your leak." Walsh went very still. "The name is Victor Hale," she said. The stillness lasted 4 seconds. It was not the stillness of disbelief. It was the stillness of a man receiving a fact that detonates a structure he has been standing inside and then having to remain standing anyway while the structure comes down around him. Walsh had known Victor Hale for 6 years, had deployed with him twice, had by the specific and particular weight of that history trusted him. She watched him process it. She did not rush it. She knew what it felt like to discover that a person you had trusted was not the person you thought they were, and she knew that the knowledge did not arrive cleanly or quickly, that it moved through a person in stages, first the logic, and then the memory, and then the grief, which was the heaviest stage of all, because it had no operational utility. "Are you certain?" Walsh said. His voice was controlled and flat, in the way of someone applying significant pressure to a significant wound. Reyes was certain, she said. "The file includes secondary intelligence contractor payment records communication intercepts. It is documented." She looked at him. "Garrett has initiated the extraction protocol through a channel outside the compromise investigation. Hale will be in custody before he knows the file has been opened." Walsh looked at the door to the family room. Through it, Elena Reyes and her daughters were waiting in the particular suspended state of people who know that the outcome of something important is being determined outside the room they are sitting in. The older girl was probably asking questions. Elena was probably answering them with the careful, measured honesty of a woman who had learned to protect her children from the worst of things while teaching them to be strong enough to eventually face all things. "She needs to know he is going to be okay," Walsh said. Not a request, a statement of something that could not wait any longer. "He is going to be okay," Sarah said. And she said it the way she said everything, without performance or softness, just the direct offering of fact. "I reviewed his chart 30 minutes ago. His pressure has held at 112/74 for the last 2 hours. The repair is solid. Briggs's work is clean." She held Walsh's gaze. "He is going to wake up. He is going to see his family. That is the truth." Walsh looked at her for one more second. Then he turned to put his hand on the family room door and went inside. Sarah stayed in the corridor. She listened without intending to, the way a person cannot help but hear the moment when a family's suspended breath finally releases the sound of Elena Reyes saying something in a voice that broke on the first syllable and held on the second, the sound of a child asking a question and being answered, the sound of relief arriving in a body that has been braced against it for hours. She turned and walked down the corridor. She had taken 5 steps when her pager went off again. She looked down at it. One word this time: conference. The number was Ardell's direct line. She took the stairs back up. Ardell was in the 4th floor conference room, standing, not sitting at the far end of the table, with his phone against his ear, his free hand pressed flat on the table surface, in the posture of a man staying in contact with something solid while the things around him move. He looked up when she entered and said into the phone, "She is here. I will call you back in 10. He put the phone in his pocket. "Garrett reached his contact," he said. "I know, I was there. Hale has been located. He is currently at the Naval Amphibious Base in Coronado. He received a call 22 minutes ago that we believe was a warning from someone inside the contractor network. Someone who monitors communication channels and flagged the moment the extraction protocol was initiated. Ardell's voice was measured but moving faster than it had in the conference room earlier, the specific tempo of a person managing something that is no longer stationary. He is attempting to access a vehicle. Sarah looked at Ardell. He is running. We have assets moving to intercept. He will not get far. Ardell paused. The issue it is the warning call. Someone inside the network knew the protocol had been activated within minutes of Garrett's contact. That level of responsiveness requires either a direct channel intercept or someone inside the notification chain. The investigation, Sarah said. If Hale has had 6 weeks inside the inquiry, he has had 6 weeks to set up monitoring protocols, fail-safes, alerts that trigger on specific keywords or communication signatures. She sat down at the table. He planned for this. Yes, Ardell sat across from her. He planned for most of it. A pause that carried weight. He did not plan for you. Sarah looked at him. The file was the variable he could not account for, Ardell said. He knew Reyes had sent something before extraction. His people intercepted the transmission metadata. They knew a file existed, but the encryption held. He ran the background query on you because he believed Reyes had sent you the key, but he could not confirm it without accessing your classified records, and your records are sealed at a level that flagged the query before it completed. He looked at her with the direct honesty of a man who owed someone the truth and knew it. The query being flagged is what brought me here this morning, and my being here is what allowed Garrett to reach you through a channel Hale had not monitored. Because Hale did not know about Garrett, Sarah said. Correct. Garrett's firm was brought in on Reyes' personal authorization outside the official investigation structure. Hale had no visibility on him. Ardell folded his hands on the table. The chain from Reyes to you to Garrett to the extraction protocol bypassed every compromised node. It worked because Reyes built it around the one person in the system he was certain had not been touched. Sarah was quiet for a moment. She thought about Reyes lying on the gurney, barely conscious, finding her wrist with his hand. She thought about him sending a file 3 days before an operation he suspected might go wrong, sending the key to a contact address belonging to a woman he had not spoken to in 4 years, trusting that the contact address would still be active, trusting that the woman would still be who she had been, and trusting the whole improbable chain of it. He is reckless, she said. Ardell almost fought. He would say thorough. He almost died. He did almost die, Ardell said. He did not in substantial part because of what you did this morning in that trauma bay. The almost smile was gone. Sarah, I need to ask you something directly, and I need a direct answer. She looked at him. The work you have done today, the file, the call with Garrett, the information you provided that crosses the line between civilian nursing staff and operational participation. He held her gaze. I need to know if that is a line you crossed because the situation required it, or because some part of you wants back in. The question landed the way direct questions land when they are the right question, when the right time, with a particular resonance that bypasses the prepared answer and reaches the honest one. She took a breath. Both, she said, and neither. Ardell waited. I crossed it because a man I helped bring home 4 years ago needed help again, and I was the only one who could provide it. She said each word with the precision of someone who has thought about the shape of a thing carefully and is reporting it accurately. That is not ambition, and it is not longing for the old life. It is what it is, which is that the person in front of me was still here and I was still capable of helping him. She paused. And I will go back to my shift when this conversation is over, and I will do my job the way I have been doing it, because that job is also something real, and it also matters, and I am not leaving it. Ardell looked at her for a long time, the look of a man who has worked with a great many people over a great many years and knows the difference between someone performing an answer and someone giving one. He nodded, his phone buzzed. He looked at it. Something in his face settled the specific settling of a conclusion being confirmed. Hale is in custody, he said. Coronado-based security and 2 of Garrett's people. 14 minutes from the time the protocol was activated. Sarah breathed. Once fully all the way in and all the way out. The breath she had been holding since she typed 9 words into a key field in a hospital stairwell. The investigation, she said, will be restarted from a clean position with the compromised nodes removed. He stood. It will take time. But the name in the file is the thread that unravels the rest of it. He picked up his jacket. Reyes knew that. That is why the file was worth dying for. He did not die, Sarah said. No, Ardell said. He did not. He left. The conference room was empty and quiet, and the afternoon light through the window had shifted to the low amber-tinged quality of late day, the particular light that makes buildings look both older and softer simultaneously. Sarah sat in it for 90 seconds. Then she stood, straightened her scrubs, and went back to work. The elevator down to the second floor. The corridor. Patricia at the nurse's station with her clipboard, who looked up when Sarah came through the door and did the rapid, comprehensive assessment of a charge nurse, who has been watching things carefully all day and has a great deal of unasked questions filed in orderly rows behind her professional expression. Bay 6, Patricia said. 61-year-old male abdominal pain waiting on the CT read. On my way. Sarah. She turned. Patricia looked at her. Not the charge nurse look, the person look, the one that did not pretend to have all the information and did not require it. You doing okay? It was a simple question, and it was not a simple question. Yes, Sarah said. And then because Patricia had earned a more complete answer, and because Sarah understood the cost of letting people who care about you stand at the edge of something without any light, I am okay. All of it, I am okay. Patricia held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then she nodded the nod of a woman who has decided to believe something because the person saying it has given her sufficient reason to. She looked back down at her clipboard. Bay 6. Sarah went to Bay 6. The man there was named Gerald. He was 61 and he had the particular uncomfortable dignity of a large man experiencing pain he could not solve himself, which was the category of situation he found most distressing. He had retired from the Marine Corps 11 years ago and had since built a custom furniture business in El Cajon and had 3 grandchildren whose photographs were on his phone, which he showed her while she reviewed his vitals because she had asked and he had needed no further encouragement. This one, he said, holding up the phone, she is 4. She calls me Bumpa. She looks like trouble, Sarah said. Absolute menace, he said, and the pride in his voice was so specific and so real that it briefly occupied the entire room. Takes after her grandmother. Sarah smiled. A real smile, the kind that arrived without announcement, the kind that had nothing to do with performance or professionalism. She reviewed his chart, explained what the CT was looking for, told him the wait time was approximately 30 minutes and that she would be back the moment the read came in. You are not what I expected, he said as she moved toward the door. She paused. What did you expect? He looked at her with the candid directness of a man from a generation that said what it meant. Someone busier. Most of the nurses here look like they are solving 3 problems while talking to you. You looked at me like I was the only thing in the room. Sarah looked at him. That is a compliment, he said, in case it did not land right. It landed right, she said. I will be back with the CT results. She stepped out. Down the hall at the nurse's station, she updated Gerald's chart and cross-referenced the CTQ and confirmed with radiology that the RID was being prioritized. She did 3 other things simultaneously. The medication reconciliation for Bay 2, the discharge paperwork for Bay 8, a 5-minute conversation with the family of the cardiac patient from the morning who had stabilized and was being moved to the cardiac care floor and who wanted to know specifically and repeatedly that he was not going to die. She told him he was not going to die. She said it the way she said everything that mattered directly and without softness and without inflation. Just the clean offering of the truth as she assessed it, which was that his numbers were good and his response to treatment had been strong and that the cardiac care team were people she trusted. He looked at her and said, I believe you. She returned to Gerald at 4:47 with his CT results. The read showed a moderate kidney stone, not surgical, manageable with fluids and pain management and the specific undramatic reality of waiting. Gerald received this news with the resignation of a man who had dealt with worse and the relief of a man who had feared worse. So I am not dying, he said. Not today, Sarah said. That is all I needed to know. She was finishing his discharge instructions when Walsh appeared at the bay door. She looked up. He was standing in the doorway with his bandaged hand at his side and an expression that she had not seen on his face before, not the operational steadiness or the controlled emotion of the corridor, but something quieter and more personal and harder to name. He is awake, Walsh said. Everything in Sarah that had been moving all day, the constant forward momentum of the work, the managed weight of everything that had happened between 6:45 that morning and this moment went still. Since when, she said. About 20 minutes ago. Briggs was with him. He is oriented. He is asking questions. His pressure is holding. Walsh paused. He is asking for you. Sarah set the discharge forms on the counter beside Gerald's bed. Gerald looked at Walsh and then at Sarah, and he was perceptive enough and experienced enough to not ask the question that was clearly forming. Go, Gerald said. She looked at him. I have the forms, he said. I can read. Go. She went. The recovery suite was on the 3rd floor, the room at the end of the corridor that Elena had been watching from a hard plastic chair 5 hours ago. The door was open. From the corridor, Sarah could hear voices, Elena's and Amanda's, the particular uneven rhythm of a conversation between two people who have just confirmed that they still have each other and are not yet sure what to do with the relief of it. She stopped at the door. Reyes was propped at a slight incline, his color still pale, but the particular gray quality of the morning, the color of a body negotiating with itself about whether to continue, was gone. His eyes were open and dark and alert, with the specific, slightly raw alertness of a person who has just come back from somewhere they were not certain they would return from. Elena was seated beside the bed, her hand over his, not speaking now, just present in the way that required no words. The older girl was on Elena's other side, leaning against her mother. The younger one was asleep again in Elena's lap, indifferent to all of it with the magnificent trust of the very young. Ghost was at the foot of the bed. He had at some point been allowed into the room, which was technically a violation of 3 separate hospital policies, in which Patricia had apparently decided to permit anyway, because Patricia made those decisions with the judgment of someone who understood that the rules existed to serve the people and not the other way around. Reyes saw Sarah in the doorway. There she is, he said. His voice was rough and thin and more real for it. She stepped inside. Elena looked up. Her eyes moved across Sarah's face with the quiet, comprehensive attention of a woman assessing the person who had kept her husband alive, trying to fit the measurement of someone into the architecture of her gratitude, which was too large for most containers. I wanted to thank you, Elena said. Her voice was steady and her eyes were not. Walsh told me what you did. Walsh was generous with the details, Sarah said. He told me you walked up to Ghost like you had done it 100 times. Sarah looked at the dog. Ghost looked back at her with his dark, steady eyes and the composed attention of an animal that had made a permanent assessment. I have done things like it, she said. Reyes was watching her, the way he had watched her in the stairwell of a destroyed building 4 years ago, with the particular directness of a person who had run out of the energy required for anything other than honesty. I owe you an explanation, he said. You owe me nothing. The contact address, flagging your application. I made decisions about your life without telling you. He said it plainly the way she preferred things said. I want you to know I did not do it lightly. I know, she said. I did it because the person in front of you was still here, she said, and I was capable of helping him. I know David. She looked at him directly. I said the same thing to you once. It seems you remembered it. Something crossed his face, the complex particular expression of a person being returned, something they gave away a long time ago, finding it intact, finding it still true. Hale is in custody, she said. His jaw tightened. 1 second, then it released. Walsh told me. The file did what you needed it to do, because you opened it, because you trusted the right person. She said it without false modesty and without inflation. She said it the way she said everything, as simple and accurate fact. Rest now. Your numbers are good, but your body needs time. Let it have time. He looked at her. Will you come back? I work in this hospital, she said. I will be here tomorrow. She meant it as a clinical statement, but the way he heard it, and the way Elena heard it, and the way Walsh, who had followed her to the door and was standing in the corridor with his arms folded and his eyes quiet, heard it was something more than that. The way it landed was the way true things land, with weight and permanence, and the specific comfort of something that will still be true when the conversation is over. She turned and walked out. Walsh was in the corridor. He looked at her and started to say something, and she shook her head, not unkindly. "Go be with your team," she said. "They need you tonight." He looked at her for a moment with the expression that had been building in him all day, the look that contained everything the operational report would not capture, and that no debrief would ever fully articulate. He said, "For what it's worth, whatever they told you when you separated, whatever reason they gave you for not continuing, they were wrong." She looked at him. "You are the best field operator I have ever seen," Walsh said. "The fact that you are also a nurse is almost beside the point." "The nurse is not beside the point," she said. "Oui." "The nurse is the point." He held her gaze. He nodded. She walked down the corridor to the elevator, and then down to the second floor, and then back into the unit that had been hers since before this morning and would still be hers tomorrow, and the day after the unit where Harold had waited patiently for his EKG results, and Gerald had shown her photographs of a 4-year-old named Bumpa's granddaughter, where Patricia ran her clipboard like a second nervous system, and where the work that needed doing was always present. She clocked in the medication station. She checked the pending charts. She picked up where she had left off the ordinary, extraordinary work of keeping people alive, one patient and one moment at a time. At 5:15, Briggs came through the trauma bay doors on his way out for the evening. He stopped at the nurse's station. He stood there for a moment without speaking, which was unusual because Marcus Briggs filled silences on reflex, the way powerful people often did, as a form of occupying space. He looked at Sarah. She looked at him. "Good work today," he said. 3 words. Flat, clinical, entirely without the warmth that the words technically implied. But they were said, and they were said to her, and in the saying was the specific acknowledgement of a man whose world had been rearranged and who was imperfectly, and in the only register available to him, acknowledging the fact. "Thank you, Dr. Briggs," she said. He left. Patricia at the desk did not look up from her clipboard, but the corner of her mouth moved. Sarah returned to her charts. The unit moved around her, the ongoing rhythm of it, the biesol and the carts and the quiet suffering and the sudden urgent suffering and the recoveries and the conversations in doorways that lasted only as long as they needed to. She moved through all of it the way she always moved, present and purposeful and entirely genuinely there. At 6:08, shift change arrived, and the overnight nurses came on, and Sarah gave her handoff report with the clean, complete precision of someone who had been doing this for 4 years and would be doing it 4 years from now. She named each patient, each status, each pending order, and anticipated change the information transferred the way she transferred everything fully and without remainder. She changed out of her scrubs. She walked down the stairs through the lobby, out into the evening air, into the city that was doing what cities did at the end of a workday, moving forward, filling the spaces between buildings with the accumulated weight of everyone's ordinary and extraordinary life. She stood on the sidewalk outside Sharp Memorial Hospital for a moment and breathed, all the way in, all the way out. Somewhere upstairs, David Reyes was holding his wife's hand. His daughters were nearby. Ghost was at the foot of the bed, watching everything the way he always did, because that was his purpose in his nature, and the thing he did not know how to stop doing. And somewhere in the city, Ardell was making calls, and Garrett was filing reports, and Walsh was sitting with his team, and the clean, necessary machinery of accountability was doing what it was built to do, slowly and imperfectly, and with the grinding certainty of an institution that eventually, when the right information reached the right hands, moved in the right direction. Sarah Calloway put her hands in her pockets and walked to her car. Tomorrow she would be back at 6:45, 14 minutes early. The supply cabinets would need checking. The overnight charts would need reviewing. There would be patients in every bay who were frightened and in pain and reaching for something steady to hold on to in the particular darkness of a medical crisis, and she would be there for each of them fully and without reservation, the way she had always been, with nothing held back and no part of herself anywhere else, because the person in front of her was still here. That was always enough. That had always been the whole answer.